G'day, Mr. Fitz here, hope you're well. In this short lesson we're going to learn about the setup of an oxy-acetylene welder. Before you get started, the most important thing is to get your safety gear, as we also call PPE, personal protective equipment. Get yourself an apron. This protects you from heat and sparks in all welding processes. You're then going to need some goggles. These have a flap that enables you to look through them when you are not welding, and this filter flap that comes down when you are doing oxy-acetylene welding, so you don't get flash in your eyes. Again, you grab a pair of gloves, make sure you've got a correct right hand and left hand to fit, and that gets you set up. Okay, over here we have acetylene. Acetylene is always red. Red for fuel, red for acetylene. And oxygen. Oxygen is always black, or blue is the colour to denote oxygen. In this system there is only one fuel, which is acetylene. Acetylene ignites and is flammable. We add oxygen to this flame to provide heat, but oxygen in itself, as you probably know, is not flammable. To get set up, the first thing we want to do is check our work area. Make sure it's clean of any scrap or rubbish. You're going to also need to get a flint lighter. This is going to enable you to light your flame. Get this prepared ahead of time. You're also going to need a pair of pliers. Have some handy. I suggest, however, do not leave these laying around on your work area, as these often have rubber and plastic which can burn and melt in your area. So keep these handy, generally in a bench or an area around your workplace, but not on your workbench. Check your torch. First thing we do, make sure that the tip is pointing straight out of the main part of the body. Make sure that the collar is tight. You also want to check that the valves on the handpiece are tight. You might just want to loosen them a little bit and tighten them, just to make sure that they're closed all the way. Always remember, right is to tight, left is to loosen or open. So I usually just open them a fraction and then close them. The other thing, you want to make sure that they're not done up too tight, because we're going to have to open these whilst the flame is operating, for the oxygen in particular. And if they are too tight, you will find that you may slip and open it too far in the process. So I suggest to just open them a fraction and close them not too tight, so you've got a good feel of how tight they are closed. Cool. Check your hoses. Make sure that they are not a tripping hazard. They're not going to be in the way. Also make sure you've got enough length. The hoses come from the bottles, so the last thing you want to do is be tugging on them or be short, so you're working too far away from your workpiece. Cool. So check that. Put your torch back down carefully. Now we're going to get into the bottle setup. First thing we want to do is check that the valves, the main knob on the bottles, is closed, which they should always be before we start setting up. So check them both, they should be closed. You also want to check this knob here. This is called our regulator. This regulates the pressure and the flow from the bottles into our handpiece. So just check these that are there loose. So you should be able to turn them left and they should feel loose. Yep, that's good to go. Now we can turn our bottles on. So we do that by turning our knobs anti-clockwise to the left, and we do that a quarter of a turn. So there's no need to keep on unwinding it. You just want to do it a quarter of a turn so the bottle is nice and open. The reason we do that is for safety. If there's ever an issue or we want to turn off the gases quickly, we've not spent a lot of time wasted trying to turn them back to close them. So just a quarter of a turn. Do it to both bottles. Quarter of a turn. Now on the gauge here, grab this camera and get a little bit closer so you can see. Here we are. We've got two gauges on our regulator. The gauge on the right shows us the bottle pressure. So that's how much pressure is left in the bottle. In this case we've got around 1000 kPa, which means the bottle's got quite a lot in it. It's about half or 2/3 full. On the left hand side is our pressure from the regulator out to our hoses. So this is the pressure we want to adjust to allow pressure to our handpiece. So we adjust this by turning the knob to the right. As this tightens, it allows pressure to go into the hoses. So for both oxygen and acetylene, we want to get up to 70 kPa. So check closely on the dials. They have different scales, so we want to go up to 70 kPa or kilopascals. So that's about right for this one. We repeat on the oxygen, and then we are set up ready to go. Now before we get too far past, another really important thing which I should have mentioned at the start is our safety operating procedure. So remember, all equipment in the workshop will have a safety operating procedure. You need to read these carefully and be well aware of these each time you use some equipment, or the first time you use equipment. Great, thank you, and please keep watching my following videos.